This is being recorded on December 18th at 1:58 p.m. here on the now sort of starting to dry out a little bit Pacific Northwest. We've been underneath a river of water here for 3 weeks, maybe slightly longer. It's been really something. It's a Pineapple Express of some significance that we've really endured here for quite a while, and the level of rain has just been phenomenal, as well as the winds, taking down a lot of trees and caused a lot of damage. So there's been tons of cleanup. At the moment, this is a recording for a metals and woo-woo wujo. The metals we'll discuss are going to pop up in a second, and then we'll go on into new projects and then into some woo-woo stuff that I'll share. That's pretty interesting, I think. Haven't done one of these in a long time. Decided to do video. I'm also attempting to record an audio, and I'll see if I can't slice that out and provide it as well for those people that don't have large enough bandwidth for the video component. Let's start off here with our Ponzi scheme of the paper debt markets and the US dollar, all of these kind of things, and their relationship to the monetary metals of silver and gold. You'll note within our data sets that we had this very prescient, scary prescient, scary accurate, so far anyway, set of circumstances in which the data set said we're going to go up through 408, come down, go back up, come down, go back up through 408 again, and then bounce around a lot, and then go through 428. And that the day we went through 428, that was the day that silver was going to start this rise. Now, we note that that did occur. The 408, initial couple of 408s were in the early part of November. We did have the word rapid with the transit through 408 three times for Bitcoin. Sorry, this is all about Bitcoin, and it's cross-linked over to silver. But the Bitcoin transit through 408 US dollars up through 428 in this range was spoken of in the data sets as a bespoke data set that went through it and said we'd go through it three times in a rapid fashion. And I think we have to agree that in the markets, something occurring over a course of a month is probably fairly rapid. And that once we went through 428 and there was a floor established for Bitcoin at 428, then we would also have established a floor for silver. And apparently that is the case so far. The day we went through 428 and held for full 24 hours was just this past Monday. We'd been up and down through, revisited 428 a number of times. Yes, we'd gone through it and stayed above it, but every day we were coming back down and retesting it. I don't follow these things that closely, so it was only by looking at a chart of the last week of the action that you can actually see that occurs. And then we go through 428 on Bitcoin and we hold them, and then we stay up there. Now, the connection to silver was that silver has virtually the same emotional profile in our work, in our webbot work, and you should go check us out at halfpasthuman.com if you're unfamiliar with this, if you're running into this for the first time. My apologies to you if you're popping in and listening to me for the very first time. But in any event, so the Bitcoin was going to go through 428. It was going to hold 428 as a floor, and on that day we would also have a floor that was set up for silver. And it would just be coincident. I mean, they're not linked, and it's, one doesn't cause the other or anything. But within the prescient level, within the forecast of what we were doing, they were temporally coincident. And it seems that that's the case. That whatever it was, 1338 or 1362 or whatever number it was for silver on that day, that's apparently going to be the low. And it's just interesting that the way that this all worked out, we have this occurring about the same time as the Fed meeting. Now, the forecast for the 408 through 428 range goes way back, like July, August, when we first started discussing this sort of thing, and then it really developed over September. And got into the details in September and shared those, and it's been out on the internet, and everybody said I was crazy. And well, coincidentally, maybe I was quite crazy, but it did indeed work out that way, that Bitcoin coincidentally transited this range three times through the 408 to 428, and then went up, and we had this apparently the beginning of the rise in silver. I understand that silver went down yesterday, that the manipulation and that kind of thing is not an issue. We're not talking about it going up every day. We're talking about a significant rise reaching a plateau in silver. Now, the language for the significant rise and the reaching a plateau for silver is coincident, temporally coincident again with a major developing debacle within the paper debt markets. And the debacle is basically a shredding or a crumbling, corroding. Some of the other words we had would relate to the market ending up looking like Swiss cheese, big holes being punched through it. They're just all kinds of descriptors for the market basically getting shredded, just getting crushed over a period of time that brings it up to March and April of this coming year. And by the market, I'm talking about the U.S. equities market. That's the one that's being referenced most normally within our data sets, simply because we started off in English so long ago. Anyway, though, it comes on up to the Dow and all of this kind of stuff, the USA paper debt markets going into a big fall over the course of 2 months in March and April of 2016. Now, the plateau in silver is reached prior to that. That is to say that silver, according to the data sets, will rise up significantly. And I'll get into that word set in a minute. But it'll rise up significantly, and then it'll reach a plateau that holds as other events take over all of our minds and occupy what we're paying attention to, and as the mechanics of the silver market break down, or the precious metals market. So the holding in price language is really referencing not everybody deciding, okay, it's worth this much and no more, $60, $80, it doesn't matter what it chooses to be the price. Then the numeracy is not pertinent. The emotional descriptors go to the idea that people would like to buy silver, they'd be willing to pay more for silver, but the mechanics of the market actually break down such that nobody can trade silver, and thus we have a period of time in which we have a plateau that is going to be, according to the data sets, a very interesting, very tense, worrisome time, et cetera, and will break in a reasonably short period, about 35 days, and it breaks because of something else, because of a new development, which I won't go into at this point. And the quote price discovery during that period of time is pegged. It's just simply held at what the last price was. No silver is trading. In the gold market, during that same period of time, the language is describing the gold market as having gone no offer, meaning nobody's offering gold for sale. There'd be plenty of people offering money to buy it, but nobody's willing to put out, plenty of people offering currency to buy it, but no one's willing to sell their gold, which is money. And so we get this period of no offer. Now, the no offer on gold goes a lot longer than this temporary market breakdown for silver that the data is forecasting for this upcoming year. I'm getting into a lot of the stuff that's in our upcoming report for January. So if you want more details on this kind of thing, you can go and check out our report when it comes out. But I thought I'd give everybody a little bit of a preview and skirt and dance around some other issues for reasons that you'll find apparent here. Now, the rise in silver, the wording we have on the rise in silver is, the word is significant. So that's the descriptor set. I'm sorry, in terms of the set, that's like the label at the very top, and then we go into this little pyramid of gradually increasing detail as we go further and further and further down. As we get closer and closer to the event, we gather more of the detail language, and so we can get a broader, much more emotionally descriptive set of words as opposed to simply significant. Because bear in mind, I've been discussing this rise in silver, this particular rise in silver for this year based on the Bitcoin coincidence temporally in this particular range. I've been discussing this since August. And so the word significant over the time, that descriptor set has grown, and we now have a much more clear picture of what the data is trying to describe. And it's not talking about, it's describing the action for silver relative to what we might think of as like chart patterns, as opposed to giving me any particular set of numbers. Sometimes we get numbers, that's very rare. So the 408 to 428 for Bitcoin was extremely rare. It comes up maybe once a year if we're lucky in our work. It's because we throw out most numbers, and very few numbers on the internet are actually typed out as numbers and come through as words. So it becomes a problematic issue. When they do appear, they're really important, as we've discovered when it forecast 300,000 dead in the Banda Aceh quake 8 months before it occurred. That number was incredibly prescient. So numeracy, when it actually occurs in a textual description of a numeral, we do pay attention to. Now, we do not have that for silver at the moment. Previously, we'd had indications that it would be about 60 to 60 or 62 to $68 at the time that it went into a plateau. Now, those numbers came up before the descriptors for the significant rise, the Bitcoin, and the flow that led us to where we're at the moment. That is to say, the conjunction or juxtaposition of our particular forecast with the events as they've unfolded. So I made forecast back in August and September about what would be happening with Bitcoin when silver started to go up. Silver did nothing until the Fed made their error, but now bear in mind also we've been describing the Fed's decision as being an error way back in August. We were describing that they would make a bad decision at the end of November time period. That would really affect everything. In any event, though, so the word significant in this case is being linguistically described in a fashion that we could read as a chart. And if we were to look at this in that language in a chart manner, then we would see that the actual cash out of your pocket to obtain some silver in the upcoming months when we reach the plateau will clearly be double what we're looking at now. So in that sense, that's the minimum level of what we see as significant within the descriptor set we've got right now is a 100% increase in the actual cost to take delivery of that ounce. And I say that, and I say this because we're not looking at, the data doesn't know about spot price versus on the street market delivery price or eBay or any of that. It describes this sort of stuff in a very much broader fashion. And the way in which it's actually describing it literally is actually getting it in hand. So we have the in hand and out of pocket language, this kind of thing, to say actual costs involved, and delays it because it also speaks in cost and time and energy. Not in this particular instance, but in other cases we'll see the data come up with things about the cost and energy. But in this case, we've got a cost in time to obtain silver, and we've got a cost in currency. And the data sets are referencing the significant step up, which is going to be clearly, which is now more clearly described as being what we would think of as like a 100% increase. Now, this may not be a 100% increase in the spot price. I have no way of knowing that. What we're looking at is a actual cost to get it into your hand. So if right now you had to pay $22, including shipping, to get an ounce mailed to you from the local or through internet, through what are they called, the primary dealers or whoever these guys are that get it from the mints, then you could figure that we'd be looking at $40 or $45 to get that same ounce at the time that we hit this plateau before the mechanisms break down. That could be a couple of weeks, it could be a couple of days for all I know, but because we don't have a description of it that way, our description of it is that we basically take these series of steps up, not crocodile teeth the way you have this up and down market action. True, there will be down days, and some days where you go up one day and then the next day is deliberately engineered to get you even with the day before, and so there's no gain. So it talks about that in the data sets. But overall, we're going to be reaching towards this significant rise, which we'll see as a 100% increase in the actual cost of getting it, what you got to dig into your pocket for to get that ounce of silver and actually have it in hand. And in that cost, it's also talking about time delays, which in some cases could be many weeks. So we have a clue there as to how long the period of time for the rise will take relative to the period of time for the plateau. I hope that makes a lot of sense, or any sense at all. Linguistically, we have to hook all these clues together in a Sherlock Holmes fashion, construct a narrative in our head, test it against the model, test it against reality to make sure that that there's at least some hope in hell that it'll appear, and then then we put it out in our reports and cross our fingers and we see where we're at. And it's usually a little bit better than chance. Actually, it's in some cases quite quite a bit better than chance, and we've been really pretty good because of the lexicon tuning I've been doing, which I won't go into at the moment. So to finish on the silver issue and the gold issue, we're going to go over these period of rises, and then we're going to hit this market pegging period, which is temporally coincident with and flows into our paper crumbling, crushing stuff that culminates in a March, April destruction, really huge level of destruction of debt at the paper level and disruptions. We have data sets for things like countries' postal systems being shut down because there's no money suddenly to fund the people that are trying to deliver the mail. Not necessarily U.S., but it'll be hitting the language. So we have all of these kind of language, all this kind of language for a great deal of disruption during this period of time, and it gets worse from there, of course. But these are some of the signs that we'll see that we're entering into this just very terrible period of time. This year of manifestation of your worst fears, probably. In any event, though, so that's it about the precious metals at the moment. Just to let everybody know where we're at, we've actually linguistically fulfilled the Bitcoin range cross. We've set apparently set our floor for silver. It's going to start rising over the next period of time into this until it reaches a plateau, and then it's going to smack out as and just sit for the maybe 35 days, 35 trading days, we think. There's just some indications of that range. And at that point thereafter, then we hit a really interesting period with hyperinflation, and the silver price goes crazy along with the prices of a lot of other things. But there's going to be a huge chunk of debt destruction. I don't know if that qualifies as deflation, but it certainly is going to be devaluation. That's going to go over the first quarter and into the end of this March, April downturn. So that's where we're at. If it helps to know that, better act on it. We're getting so close. Things are manifesting right and left. It's not a question of if, it's a question of when now. So let's go into a couple of other things. If this is also in the metals category, we've got a lot of indicators for copper taking over from silver in terms of biocide capabilities. It's going to be some kind of really interesting discoveries about copper. If you're an investor kind of guy and you make a big killing by investing in one of these companies that does this sort of work later on, kick us a few bucks as you go down the road. Send us a donation now and again. But see, here's what's going to happen. Copper is getting the crud kicked out of it at the moment, as well as oil. Better check our new reports for information on oil. There's going to be big changes there. But just dealing with the metals at the moment, the copper stuff has got a big building set underneath it that says that there's going to be this new discovery about copper and how we use it, and we're going to change how we use it. And instead of doing things one way with copper, we're going to start doing something else entirely different, which is this microplaning is what it's called. I don't think that's an appropriate term. It's not microplating, but it's going to turn out that copper is incredibly useful as a transference vehicle for antibacterial, antivirus, and antifungal properties every time you touch it as a human. Much more than just the fact that the copper doesn't transmit the bacteria to you. It's that there's this little microelectric spark that occurs every time you touch the copper, almost all the time, depending on your static electric charge and so on. And that's going to end up having this sort of like charged effect, sort of like a little energy glove or something. And so the copper industry is just going to go crazy, starting to coat everything possible with copper, all door handles, everything humans touch. They'll start in hospitals first. It'll go to nursing homes. It's just going to be a minor boon for the copper industry because there's tens of millions of door handles, window handles, door pulls, refrigerator pulls, buttons on microwaves, anything you can imagine that you have to touch as a human will get this process of copper put on it. And it'll take us a couple of decades to do, and like I say, it'll be sort of a minor boon for copper. So if you invest in that kind of thing, I'm sure the Chinese are going to make out like bandits on it. Now, some other things here. Uh, okay, so we'll leave the metals. In this case, we're just dealing with the top three metals in our little uh, pyramid of elements, wherein I've taken the ordinary Mendeleev periodic table of elements, and it's no longer a table, it's a pyramid. And what we do is we look at materials based on, here anyway, at our little lab, based on their stable isotopes found in nature. And so tungsten has 0 stable isotopes found in nature. So it's the top of the pyramid. Right underneath it is gold. It only has 1. Silver has 2. Copper has 3, et cetera, et cetera. And anyway, so we're doing some new work here. We have to be careful in Washington State because they tax the absolute fuck out of you for doing investigative research that may end up creating a company because they think you're in business. And you may crap out long before you get to the stage of being a company, but you've got to pay tax if you're, if you do things in Washington State in a screwy way. So we're just thinking about this. No money is being invested or that sort of thing. But we're thinking about this particular idea based on some long-range stuff within the data sets. So it's kind of cheating, I understand that. I've got a hint out of the data sets of a technology that's going to be appearing among others in the middle of the 2020s, and it'll be extremely successful. And so I figure, well, why not me? I'm a sharp guy. I know how to do this kind of thing. I do a lot of building and engineering. So I'm going to try and set myself up and to get into that industry there and build this thing out. And I'm not going to go into what that is at the moment, but I am going to say that as we go, there's a lot of investigation that's going to be required here, a lot of basic research that we have to do, and thinking about it because we're going to attempt to do a technology jump, if you will. And in so doing, we have to investigate properties of materials, and I will report in an open source fashion anything interesting I discover that may be of interest to others. Now, I'm doing this entirely in a selfish fashion because if I happen to find something, which I have found something, and I'll get that out in a second. But if I find a chunk of information here and it aids someone else in doing what they're doing and they report back in an open source fashion, oh, hey, look what I did with this idea and here it goes, well, then it can magnify my efforts and I can say, oh, hey, I don't have to do that line of research. Joe down in Florida did that for me and he ended up with this set of conclusions and he was able to build this from the idea. Now I can just leapfrog that. And so it's, like I say, it's self-serving. But as we go along, we're going to do open source on everything we possibly can. And then if and when we can say that, okay, we know what we're doing, we're going to try and set this up as a going enterprise with the idea of being one of those people in the 2020s popping out with this, then the project will go 100% open source. So that in that sense, I'm sort of creating the competition. But I'm an old fart, so I don't care much. It's not like I'm trying to set up a business for 40 or 60 years. I just want one of these things because it's really cool. Anyway, so we've got a lot of new projects going. I'm ending up setting up right behind me. There's a window. On the other side of the window, I will very soon. Very, very, very damn soon. As soon as we can do it, we actually have to get wet weather gear for our crew. It's that bad. Walking around in these big rubber suits all the time really makes everything very slow when you're trying to do work outside like that. But I've got to get Kale wet weather gear and get everybody suited up because it's so raining so hard. But we're going to set up, put up a new deck, and I'm going to set up a yurt. And we're going to use that as our base of operations for this new endeavor. So it'll soon be showing right behind me, and it'll obscure the fence on the other side, but that part of it doesn't matter. In any event, though, the last little bit on the metals before a total segue into the woo-woo. As in going along in our particular line of research and thinking about things, I've discovered that, or I've noticed the obvious and then made a discovery. The discovery relates to language that's in, or some descriptions in languages I won't go into, that it's ancient text, and I'm just going to hold those close to me at the moment. But I'll tell you what the material is rather than, and the little point of information that's interesting, and then go on to some other discoveries here. And we'll get into the sources later on if it's pertinent. But the language I've discovered relates to the idea that in ancient times, it was known that certain metals and materials had magnetic properties well in advance of their electric properties. So you could look at material as being electrically positive or magnetically positive. And if it's down at one end of the range, then it's less so on the other end. As a result of this kind of thinking, we've chosen a good metal, say copper, for making for winding into the rotors in our electric motors because it's electrically positive. But if one wanted to do something that was magnetically positive in the same sort of fashion, one might want to use another material. And another material that would be really good for that would be tin, because tin is magnetically positive and electrically negative the way that copper is electrically positive and magnetically negative. And so the ancient descriptions actually show that tin was used, and it led me to further stuff because of discussion there in these texts of alloys. And I've discovered that indeed we do have modern day nuclear level metal studies done to support this ancient supposition, or not supposition, but premise. Their premise was that you got a particular kind of magnetic property out of the alloy of magnesium and tin. And if you go and look, you'll see that indeed MnSN2 has a known magnetic anomaly, is how they describe it. Now, in the ancient texts, they talk about engineering magnesium and tin and other metals in extremely small amounts. So you'd basically have a magnesium tin alloy that may have 1/10 of 1% specific levels of contamination. And it's not really contamination, it was more like binding or scattering metals that aided in the process, but they weren't really a component in the end result. But as far as anybody could tell in the text anyway, they didn't hurt. But the interesting part of this was the magnetic anomaly on this was in the ancient texts anyway, is described as being what we might think of as like magnetic stilts. So the idea being that you could get a particular set of alloys of magnesium and tin, MnSN2, Mn1.367SN, some of these other alloys, because you're going to create multiples as you attempt to create the MnSN, and the ratio could be, you could sort of control it. You end up with a sheet of this stuff, and it could be activated any number of ways. Now, in the ancient text, they were discussing activating it vibrationally or acoustically, perhaps. The translation is less than adequate, and I've got to do some more source work, but not electrically. But I'm of the opinion you could do something in a cymatics fashion and activate it electrically. So maybe anybody out there interested in magnetic effects of metals may really want to have a look at this and examine the idea that magnesium tin alloys could be manufactured in such a way as to produce a magnetic field in sort of the same way that we try and produce electric fields with rotating rotors around magnets. If we get any further in this, or as we get further in this, I'll detail what experiments we've done. Bear in mind, we're not doing this in any way than any taxable form in this damn republic I live in, because we don't have a hope in hell of being successful at this point. It's just basically a wild-ass guess that maybe we can position ourselves as some of the base founders. And I'll give you sort of a hint here. What we're attempting to achieve would be like being in on the ground floor of the creation of automobiles, where you had, Ford and Chrysler and all these other people out there, and Studebaker and dozens of different kinds of car manufacturers in the late 1800s. We're about to enter into a period of time where we're going to see that level of innovation springing up in a global fashion that's then going to spur a massive change in the economy. Even though we're going to be going into an ice age, the economy globally was going to take a big turn over the course of, say, 2025 through 2300 for all I know. And we're going to transit, let's just make it easy and say we're going to transit from the Flintstone era behind us over to the Jetson era ahead of us. if we're looking at the world in a cartoon sort of a fashion. Now we got some really nasty cartoons to go through before we get there, but nonetheless, it does seem to be positive in its general direction and overall results. So tin magnesium, guys, magnesium tin, tin in other forms. Tin's very interesting. Examine tin, especially in the stable isotopes. That appears to be a real key. And also there is some mention of tin and what they could be describing something like radium. I'm just not sure. But it does appear to have a radiative or radioactive component to it that in no way was apparently dangerous, but was noticed in the presence of phosphorescence and so on. Again, I don't want to get into the details. And then one last thing on the precious metals, by the way. Isn't it curious that on the dollar bill, the all-seeing eye is basically a pyramid, aka pyramid scheme, aka Ponzi scheme? I think they've been telling us this kind of stuff all along. Okay, so we've gotten over some of our new projects here. We're going to be doing this ultimately and ending it up in open source. We'll be moving the studio into the yurt as soon as it's available, set it up permanently so that we don't have to do this disassembly process all the time in our little tiny house. Now some woo-woo stuff here, okay? Just to get I've had some people, I've got notes over here, but just to clear up some responses to some of the things I've said or made notes of on Twitter. By the way, if you want to keep track of what the hell we're doing around here, Twitter is just the easiest way for us to do it. There isn't much time we're very short-handed all the time and in tight space, so we can't really expand here, and that's one of the reasons we're trying to find new property and move, which just isn't happening. But in any event, so onto the woo-woo stuff. I'm going to answer or deal with a couple of different questions that have arisen based on some of the things I've said. One of the things I talked about was the idea of AI or artificial intelligence, and I had a lot of responses to that, and I'll say that yes, you're correct. The artificial intelligence is intended to mimic humans, but it in no way has the capacity. Computers, basically, you can think of it as this way. When I say that there's no self there for the computer to become aware of, you can think of it as computers cannot in any way mimic emotion. They can mimic some of the results of emotion. So you can have a computer pretend through an Android, or not pretend, but put on the face of anger. But the computer isn't angry. It's simply executing instructions. So the computer is not motivated by anger. It may want to express anger because the software tells it to express anger through the face of the Android it's controlling, or the avatar on the screen, etc. But in no way does the computer feel any language or feel any of the language, computer language that it has to execute. And it knows, for instance, to crinkle up the face and snarl the teeth and all of this kind of stuff. But again, it's not feeling anything. So computers cannot be motivated. All they can do is the software. So if I don't put in the line in the software, take over the planet, the computer is never going to try and take over the planet. And so it's not motivated to. It has no desire. And desire and emotion are what cause humans to move in life, to want to do things. Computers ain't alive. And so artificial intelligence is an attempt to mimic the results of talking and interacting with a human, not to create an awake and aware being that can, and because you've got to understand that there is no intelligence and no awareness of self. There is no self without birth, death, and emotion. Without those, and since computers are not born and they don't die and they have no emotion, you'll never ever have to deal with a computer trying to take over the planet of its own will. Now, certainly if you had a very powerful computer system, blah, 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 some evil son of a bitch could get out there and write that line in there, take over the planet and give it to me. And then it would do that. But it doesn't want to do it. It's not motivated to do it other than through the meeting its needs to express that program. So we're sort of done with the AI. Now here's the thing about channelers, okay? Really serious subject. I know because I've lived with the results of this. There are many reasons I can get into at some point in the future when we all have time and we're all really near death and we just don't give a shit anymore. Maybe we're just sitting around. Maybe we can get into some of the reasons for this. But I can tell you, if you go and look at it, you can find lots of ancient texts and lots of traditional understandings of, all the way from Buddhism through Taoism and so on, of those parts of the reincarnation process that will coincide with what I'm about to tell you. And that is that if you're a channeler, this is about channeling, by the way, these people that sit there, glaze over, and get taken over by, well, entities, let's call them entities, that then spout through their mouth and so on. If you're a channeler, that's fine. You can channel. I'm not disputing that. That's great. Go ahead and have all the channeling you want to do, but bear in mind something here. Channelers pay for their activities not in this life, but in their next few lives. If they're lucky, maybe only one next life. And they'll end up being born as paranoid schizophrenics or psychotics, and they will not ever in that next life, or they will have maybe a brief period in that next life, depending on how much of a channeler and how much damage was done this life. But in the next life, they will suffer as a paranoid schizophrenic or a psychotic. Those are just two broad categories that we can lump their activities into. And the reason it has to do, or the reason that this occurs, is because in that next life, they're going to be, let's say, predisposed towards the same kind of activity, the same looseness of conscious control that allows channeling in the first place, only it becomes excessive. And when it becomes excessive like that, then you, as a being, you can't tell reality from non-reality, and the non-reality will intrude and overwhelm and subsume you, and you become a paranoid schizophrenic or a psychotic. Now, I know this for a fact. I lived with my brother who was a paranoid schizophrenic, early onset, so in a previous life he must have been channeling at a very young age. There are other things that can also cause that to be carry over in your breath form, your soul that takes these kind of things with the karma from one life to the other. And so I'll discuss karma in a brief second here too. I'm not going to do the whiteboard kind of thing because I've got to get moving and I've got a lot of activity I need to accomplish, or a lot of work I need to accomplish the rest of today. But let's continue with this idea for a second. Channeling is basically allowing your consciousness to become porous, if you will, okay? And in doing so, you allow the intrusion of energies into your sphere. You are a sphere, not a hard shell. Even though my head makes noise when I rap on it, it's not hard. It's merely the condensed center of a big round, sort of round, really an oblate spheroid energy body, and that's the primary body that is affected by the channeling. And what happens if you allow this, if you willingly go along with this and accept it and become part of it and embrace it and so on, then what happens is that it becomes easier over time. Channelers will tell you that the first time may have been difficult and it becomes easier over time. Well, it's because they're allowing this porosity, they're developing a relationship with with themselves and a relationship with these entities that is not healthy in the long run, because the next life they'll be born in a situation where that channel is just 100% open, and they call it channeling for a reason. It's like there's a tube into your consciousnness that allows the thoughts of these entities to get in, and I can explain about the entities in great detail in another period of time, but I'll give you a brief overview in a minute. But fundamentally what happens is you get born into this next life. You will probably go through your childhood and into up to the point of puberty, more or less okay, maybe a little bit on the flaky side, nothing really too extraordinary, and then you hit puberty and you get hit by all these hormones and all these channels are reopened. And then you can't tell what's going on because you do not have the experience of this life where you willingly accepted the responsibility to your own self and the damage that is done in the channeling process, and then you're just a victim of it in that next life, and you become a psychotic or a paranoid schizophrenic because you cannot tell your brain and your mind can no longer decode the sensory impressions coming in because it's being polluted by stuff that intrudes within the sensory processing part of the brain itself. And as a result of that, as I say, you become extremely mentally unbalanced. And if you're lucky, you die at a reasonably young age so that you don't have to suffer much and you can burn it out relatively quickly. So just a caution to channelers. That's what the channeling process leads to. Personally, I think channeling is really stupid because you'll notice that you never get any good information out of channelers. And I'm not talking about I'm talking about like, Bashir and channeling Ra and all this other crap, right? And Ramther and all these kind of people that channel these entities that give themselves names and take on a cohesion. There's something about this that you need to understand too. These entities are not beings as we understand them. These entities can be thought of as like stray thoughts or stray emotional debris floating around within the materium that finds into that channel, goes on in, sucks into your energy through this karmic process, and I can get into that in a few minutes. Then they grab more of them and get into your brain. They're not. The entities being channeled are not self-aware. The entities that are being channeled only exist because of the channeling and because of the audience. If they're not getting emotional response from that, the entities just go away. And you can do this yourself, and I've done it, and it's just horrific to the people involved. Go on into some place, sit in the back room where there's a channeler going on, and then you'll watch them all, and you'll feel this entrainment, the whole audience getting all, like cone heads. They're all sitting there vibrating as the entity starts sucking energy and melding it all together into this cohesive form in the room that they actually live within. They exist within that energy. And then if you stand up and do something discordant, you can shatter it all, and even the channelers get all disoriented and very upset. And, we'll literally flail around sometime on the floor as the entity shatters and cracks up against the rational, willful energy to disbelieve in its existence and deny it any of your energy. It basically, it's the same thing as saying this is solid reality that I can perceive with my senses. I don't intend to include this random stray stuff trying to create and live off of the energy in a very parasitic fashion. And fundamentally, that's what it is. The energy of these, quote, entities is very parasitic. It only lives through the host, and that's why the channeler is indeed a host, and it's being slowly consumed over time, and it pays for it in its next life. Just an understanding, if you go back and deal with yogis, go back and deal with Taoist or Buddhist and look at the literature, and then I also have several layers of first-hand understanding of this phenomenon, this thing that occurs with humans, and the stray energies that are running around. So that's my understanding of the channeling. Now, karma. Karma is a word that is plural for karmans. Karmans are the mechanism within materium by which a lot of stuff happens. So let's take channeling as an example. Okay, so you're a channeler, and you've got your big spherical body out here all around you, and the entities are poking their way through the willing Swiss cheese effect you allow. And what happens there is that the karmans are actually part of the transport method of the quote entity thoughts that are coming on in. And in fact, the karmans are the chief mechanism by which these entities achieve their parasitic relationship with you. And what happens is that when karmans are attracted to energy, and there's this really good book out there written by a German, I've gotten it sitting around somewhere, I think it's upstairs. He's a follower of the Jain religion, that's Jain. They're one of the more they're one of the oldest religions on the planet. I hate to even call it a religion per se. It is in this age, but in previous ages it may not have been. It may have been more of a technology school. In any event, the Jain has a huge cosmology going back hundreds of thousands of years in a very cohesive fashion. And this German fellow, I think in the 1960s maybe, was a great thinker about all of this. And as a German, he likes codifying and collecting and organizing things. So he wrote down everything that was known about karmans from the Jain religion in the German language in a very, basically sort of like a database fashion. He just described them and put them into all their categories and so on. Now, to a certain extent, you have to understand that this is like these people that are out there hunting for smaller and smaller particles in CERN, supposedly. They're looking for ultimate small particles. This guy was sort of doing the same kind of thing. You don't really have to catalog the karmans as deeply as he did. I mean, he got down to the nuances of all the different kinds and what they did and so on. And it's an interesting little book, maybe 120 pages. worth getting. Most of it's in German, so I think though that there is a decent English translation these days. In any event, though, so he's one of a dozens of thinkers about karmans that have really examined it all, and they presented us with a lot of information about them. So we can think of karmans as being positive, neutral, and negative. And it's not that they are positive, neutral, and negative. That's the energies they're attracted to. So there's the neutral kind of karman that basically we could think of as like filling up all the space that's the dark matter and that kind of stuff, and we walk through them and move around all the time, and we're swimming in a sea of them, and they don't really stick to us. They're neutral. They they can become either positive or negative over time. They're in a position of not doing much because of the karman's life cycle, if you will, its structure. Okay, but the positive and negative karmans are attracted to positive and negative energy. So Hitler, boy, he's got lots of negative karmans, right? He'll be dealing with stuff for lifetimes, as will lots of the people involved. And in fact, they're probably reincarnating now and having all kinds of problems as a result of carrying along the karmans from their activities in previous lives. And what happens is that the karmans, in a negative fashion, they stick to you every time that there is negative energy, that you're exhibiting stuff that draws in negative energy and creates it in the materium. And so it's like a magnetic process. It's like we're magnets, and they're just sort of iron filings hanging around waiting to stick to us. And if you become negative, you get a lot of these negative iron filings around you. Now, they can be, they're negative emotionally because of the nasty, evil things that you do, but they can promote your activities within the materium because you gain strength in this weird, perverted way from all these negative karmans that glue to you. Now, you'll pay for it in the next life. I kid you not. You're going to pay for it in the next life. But, and you'll pay for a lot of it in the burning out of the karman debris in the process of cleansing the breath form for the next life. And I'll explain that in a second. But in any event, so the positive karmans, they accrue to you as well. Now, you can't go along and you can't say that Hitler was 100% negative and Mother Teresa is 100% positive. In fact, Mother Teresa in many regards is much more negative than Hitler at a personal level because of her activities and so on, and in what she did was an attractant for negative karmans to her because of the kind of activity that she promoted. Now, so was Hitler's activity, but it was distantly removed from him. So that's what this German fellow was actually codifying in the 50s, was that you can have karmans that are directly stuck to you and karmans that are hanging out a bit on this part of your energy body and so on, and here's why it all occurs. Anyway, so you get people that collect positive karmans, and they go on to have very cool lives the next time because of the nature of what karmans are and what they do. Karmans have a function in this life, and they also have a function in your next life. The function in this life is to draw more of and promote the kinds of energies that you're projecting outward. So they're fundamentally like the mechanism, the machine whereby the law of attraction works, and whereby a lot of these other metaphysical laws, actually, this is how they actually function, is through the karmans. And there you get positive karmans flowing for you. They'll go on out and scoop up a lot of other stuff. Gold loves positive karmans. Silver loves positive karmans. So you get rewards. Universe loves to reward you, give you more positive karmans, and off you go. And the more you get, the better you are. And then also, the more you carry over into the next life. And it's not like you have to balance them out. Like if you had a lot of negative karmans in one life, you're going to need to balance them out with positive ones in the next life. It doesn't quite work that way. It's much more of a like dust on your body. You have positive days when you collect a lot of positive shiny dust, and you have negative days and you collect a lot of negative dust. That's just sort of the regular way of dealing with things as humans. If you're in a negative dust cloud and something comes along, you're going to see it as negative. If you're more positive, you attract more positive energy. You see even burdensome things as more positive. So there's a benefit for the karmans in this life. Not only in dealing with good stuff, not only hauling in that same kind of energy to you, but also in providing you with sort of a perceptual filter, if you will, that allows you to see the more positive side of things and thus even fix problems easier. A lot easier to fix a problem if you've got a good attitude, right? And you get a better attitude, the more positive reinforcement you get from the universe. So like, the Think and Grow Rich, Napoleon Hill, all of those kind of fellows, from the 1920s through even to today, have really got something there, because they're telling you without ever reaching into it using these words, they're telling you how to deal with karmans, how to bring the good karmans to you, how to structure your being to generate and look at more positive energy, which gets you more positive energy, and this gets you out of the funk you happen to be in now, you poor bastard. So anyway, this is how, if you're in your basement, you end up getting out of the basement and go to the penthouse, is that you start working at a level that actually attracts karmans to you, and then success flows. So that's really sort of an understanding of karmans at a very crude level. It's very sophisticated. I mean, it's quite amazing what occurs, the nuances, how the karmans flow through materium like lymph or blood through a human body, what they do for us, how to move them from one person to another, and so on. But also the karmans in the process of death here, real quick. A lot of people will tell you I'm absolutely crazy, and I'm certain I am. It does not mean I'm wrong. There is indeed a whole lot of mental activity after death. It's called the metem psychosis, M-E-T-E-M, psychosis period, in which your minds react differently because your body is gone. In the process of dying, you're going to go to hell. You're also going to go to heaven. Everybody goes to hells. There's two of them, and everybody goes to heaven. If you think about it, your heaven is absolutely perfect for you. It has to, in order for it to be perfect for you, it is an individual heaven. There's no other beings in there. You may think of other beings, but they don't exist with you. Even your gods in this world don't cross over the metempsychosis layer into the period of time on the other side of death. When you go to heaven, your heaven is a wonderful period of time, timeless. You're there perpetually. We are all there now in some real meaningful sense. We're all in our heavens, but there's no one else there, because I couldn't be in your heaven, you couldn't be in mine, because your mere presence of having a separate will from mine would be disturbing. And this heaven is a process, is part of the necessary process of the progress of humanity through multiple births, life through multiple births, and what you end up being and becoming over time. So, this is getting rather long. So anyway, the heaven is also a singular period of time, followed by a good sleep, and then you're reborn. Now, before you get into your heaven, you got to go through your hells, and your hells are dual. There's two kinds of hells. There's the hell you have to suffer, where you burn out all the crap that you've done to other beings. Okay, all the shit you brought into this life, all the negativity that you expressed in this life, has to be burned out from your breath form, from your body, from your soul. That template, this breath form, goes with you from life to life to life to life. And it's sort of like you're taken off and hung up in a closet while you're in your hells and your heavens and your rest period. And then when you come alive again, you take off that breath form again and shake it loose and get born into it. You get born into basically a little blob of protoplasm that can take on anybody's breath form, and that's what happens in times. That's why you don't necessarily look like your parents. Well, you will not be the same as your parents. Genetics are not as we understand them. Their purpose is not as we're being told by science. Which is, boy, there's a whole lot of other notes, and we're just not going to be able to get to it today, so I'll finish this up and get on with my other work. But here's the deal. When you get born into the protoplasm, you don't actually get into the body until the body's created. It's there as a template, absolutely without soul, up until maybe, in some cases, as late as 5 or 6 years old. It depends on your individual soul and the circumstances of being reborn. Mostly it's before you're about 2 years old, because when you get into the Y period, you're certain that the new being has taken residence, and the breath form has been mated to that protoplasm, and it's all mushed together in a cohesive fashion, or starting to get integrated, if you will. And so the breath form, in order to come into this life again, has to be cleansed. So you got to sort of take your soul, if you will, your template, and when it's hanging up, it goes to dry cleaning. Okay, so you're in your hell. Excuse me, going through and burning off all the bad stuff you did to other people. And the other hell, by the way, is all the bad stuff you did to yourself. So channelers, that's where they really suffer, is because they're doing a lot of nasty bad stuff to themselves, and they just don't understand. In any event, so we get onto this, and so you're in your hells, you're burning all this stuff off. You're burning off a lot of the excess karman's debris that you don't need. that's burdensome. You're releasing the karmans to go and do the work, if you will. They're little tiny mechanized components, if you will, of the materium, and they're part of the matrix, and they run around and they do stuff, and it's necessary that they go and do stuff to support the materium running. And so we wouldn't want to tie them all up with us. And we tie up a lot of karmans from life to life. So we got to burn off a bunch of them. And that's what the hell's all about. And then after the burning off process, you go into your heaven, and it's like, oh, phew. And then you get a nice long sleep, and then you're reborn again. And when you're reborn again, after you actually plop into the body and you start merging your soul template breath form into that protoplasmic body that's been prepared for you, which you select, yet another wujo. At that point, the karmans that you had that were tagged to that breath form reattach. And that's where you get the, quote, predestination feeling part of life. It's because there's stuff you still have to deal with. Because some karmans can't be burned off because there's not enough energy, if you will, to burn them off in the period of your hells. So they're going to stick with you, and you've got to deal with them in this life. Because basically, as we all know, the purpose of this being born is to, in this life, learn what to do and what not to do. And so the karmans are there to help you. They're there sticking to your template as you're born. It seems cruel, but they're, sticking to the template to break your leg in that car accident at age 11. Or to have that kid beat the crap out of you and put you into the hospital at age 13. Those things are there because it is necessary that you deal with that particular situation. And the karmans are not intelligent, but the materium is, and so it brings out the karmans, and they're sort of like they're like the triggers in a database in SQL Server. A certain thing happens, the trigger fires off and pops off a bit of code. And you get this multiplicity of effect just from loading the database of all these little bits of code popping off. And that's kind of what goes on. We've got a database of karmans hanging all over our bodies that are going to be used in our next lives to trigger events that it is necessary for us to go through. And so thus we have our bodies as they are. So in other words, it wasn't like I was planning for that chunk of steel to go through my thumb at age 21. It wasn't like I was planning to break my collarbone when I was 13 on that football field chunk of metal, that holds up the goalpost. These things were, in essence, opportunities provided by universe for me to experience certain things because it was necessary. And there was a karman that was probably stuck right there where it had to be broken. And so universe said, oh, hey, here's a good opportunity. Let's get that karman to work and smash him into that chunk of metal and break his collarbone. And it's like, that's sort of how it works. And so the breath form that I have now, the body that I have now, boy, man, I must have just been really hard on it in my previous life. Really terrible. I'm a fighter in this life, and I've lost a lot of fights, so I must have deserved to lose those. But in any event, in my previous life, I must have done a lot of stuff that had to be carried over into this life in order to get this body this beat up and still be around. And see, there's the thing, we all have to learn what to do and what not to do. The karmans are here to help us. So karma, your collective karma, is the mechanism whereby you express your destiny. It's not destiny in the sense of predestination. It's like all these opportunities. Now, had I broken my collarbone and not dealt with the issue, whatever it was, then, and in fact, maybe that was the case. Maybe I had to have that chunk of steel go through my hand in my 20s because I didn't do with my body what I should have done when I broke my collarbone when I was 13. So it's nothing you can really figure out now. I'm certain I'll work it out in the metempsychosis stage. I'll say, oh, that's why that shit happened. Okay, that makes sense, and then basically that's where we're at. So karma is the collective. Karmans are good, neutral, and negative. Many subdivisions. It matters to a lot of actual people because they are trying to do karmic hacking, if you will, and trying to manipulate karma in particular ways. Nothing wrong with that. I think that may be very valid, may be perfectly apropos in this materium. I got other stuff I want to do. I'm really hooked on the technology and that kind of thing. So my mind is fascinated by that, so that's where I'm going. If I'd had a different bent, maybe I would have been into the karman hacking. But there's a lot of crews out there doing that sort of thing. If you want to get involved with it, I think I would start with the Taoist forums. There's a number of them, and they can get you into various different ways of thinking and the various things you can do for attracting karma and repelling what you think of as negative karma and manipulating it to some degree in this life. I mean, it's possible. It's a function of karma consciousness, like all things here. So I guess that's it. It's a little over an hour. That's just getting into way too long. Plus, I got to do the dishes. So I got to get at this stuff. Good karma to y'all, and we'll see you in the next Wujo. I'll get this thing uploaded, and then in a couple of days I'll upload the audio so people can throw that about too. It's going to be an interesting year in 2016. Metals. The beginning of the big Renaissance wave takes off in 2016. We've got all kinds of stuff happening in the USA pop and global pop that's going to change life forever. So it's one of these pivot years. So you know how you look back and you say, oh, every 15 years or so, everything's really different and changed. We're really going to feel that process viscerally by the time we get to the end of 2016. It's really going to be a year of manifestation. I think this is good. I like things when they're dynamic. As a judoka and a ketoka, you're much better off when someone's when those energies are involved, when they're in play. It's easier to move it than it is to try and pick it up and move it. So anyway, enjoy the energy of 2016 and work on your karmans to be able to get a better attitude and view of it. Bye, guys.